So, I want to start off by saying welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, welcome. If you're a fanatic of everything entertainment, this is the channel for you. But in today's video, we'll be ranking all 5 Crow films from worst to best. So let's get into it. So, growing up as a kid and being a teenager on the internet, people always told me to only watch the first Crow because the sequels are not worth it. And there was always that feeling where like, okay, I want to see how bad these are. I want to see these movies for myself. And I'm gonna be honest with you. There's only one film worth watching in here, and that's the first. There's one that's okay, and the rest are bad. So, with that being said, coming in at number 5, we have The Crow, City of Angels. If you have been watching my review series, you know that this is my least favorite. But a lot of people put Wicked Prayer as their worst. But with this one was released 2 years after the first film because the Weinsteins wanted to make some money. They wanted to get this movie out as fast as possible. They ruined another film franchise on top of ruining people's lives, but that's besides the point. Like, they wanted to get this movie out as fast as possible because they saw dollar signs, and I find that to be really disrespectful, and the movie itself is horrible. It feels like one big long music video because there's things that happen, the pacing in here is absolutely weird. There's things that go by, there's like 2 or 3 things that happen within one scene, and that scene is like a minute or two. The pacing is really fast, but at the same time, it feels like there is so much crammed up in here that even though this movie is the shortest, it feels like the longest, which is really weird for me to say. The only highlights in here is the vibe and aesthetic they try to copy off the original, and then some cool shots of the Crow on his motorcycle. Everything else I'm either mixed on or negative on. Like, even Vincent Price in here, I think he did okay with what he was given. The girl that plays Sarah, she's okay, but everything else is horrible. The villains in here is horrible. The side villains, the main villains, the BDSM shit, the story in here is horrible as well. But yeah, I hate this movie. I don't want to talk about it any further. So coming in at number 4, we have The Crow, Wicked Prayer. Like I said, a lot of people put this one as the worst, but I sort of knew what I was getting myself into, whenever I was going to watch this movie, because like I said, I heard a lot of people say this is the worst. And yeah, this is a really bad film. I do not deny it, but I feel like Wicked Prayer is the Room of the Crow films. At times it is so bad it's good. It is more entertaining than City of Angels, even though technically, yes, this is a worse movie. This one is more enjoyable for me because at times it is so bad it's good. I thought Edward Furlong was actually okay in here. I think his performance, before he puts on the makeup was pretty good. I mean, it's not great, but it was better than what I thought it was going to be. And then, after he puts the makeup on, I was mixed on it because, he tries to act tough, even though he's this little scrawny dude. When he's doing his faces like, and I'm like, what are you doing? The villains in here, horrible. I hate Tara Reid in here. I hate Dennis Hopper in here. I hate the dude from Buffy the Vampire Slayer in here. I'm not a fan of the setting either. It just doesn't feel like The Crow. If that's one thing that the first 2 films did great, was the vibe and aesthetic. The first film was Detroit, the second one was Los Angeles, and they make those cities feel like their own. This isn't really a city setting. It's this dry desert state. I forgot what state it was. I forgot in my review, and I still don't remember. But mostly everything about this movie is atrocious, but at times I just get more enjoyment out of it than I do City of Angels because it's so bad it's good. I get where people are going with this movie, but I like it just a tad bit more than most people do, which is not saying much. So coming in at number 3, we have this year's The Crow. Now, I just did my review on this yesterday. I saw this the other day at Thursday at 9:05 p.m. And yeah, this movie is bad. But yeah, this movie is bad. Just because it's coming in at number 3 doesn't mean it's a good movie or an okay film. It is bad. But I do have a little bit more enjoyment out of it than I do the bottom 2. Even though that, like I said, it's not saying much because, like I said, growing up, people told me, do not watch the Crow sequels. The first one's the only one worth watching. And this remake solidifies that. Okay, I was rooting for this movie, sort of. So I was like, I'm going to give it a chance. It can't be that bad. It is pretty bad. But it's not as bad as Wicked Prayer or City of Angels. It does feel a bit lifeless. There are things in here that I do like. I like that they try to expand the relationship between Eric and Shelley. I just don't find the relationship believable as true love or real love because it's 2 drug addicts and all they really want to do is do drugs and have sex. That's it. That's not true love. That just seems like a fling that would only last a few months to a year at most, you know? That's doesn't seem to me like true or real love. It just didn't really work for me. But I do like the action sequences and gore in here. I thought that was pretty good, but all of them were spooled in the trailers or they released the whole scenes online. Like, what the fuck? Um, I hate when trailers do that, you know? But yeah, this movie not as bad as the bottom two, but it is a pretty bad film. It is my least favorite movie of the year, but then again, I've only seen 10 movies because I pick and choose what I see now. And I was really rooting for this. I did this whole review series leading up to this movie, and I walked out disappointed. I was teetering between like a 37% and a 47%. I solidified myself on a 44% because it is bad. It's like a 2 out of 5. If it does come out on Blu-ray or 4K, I will get it because I am a completionist, which I hate that, but yeah, this movie is bad. Stay away from it if you had like high expectations, but if you had low expectations, then you might get something out of it. There are things that I enjoyed about it, but it's nowhere near as good as my number 2 or my number 1. So coming in at number 2, we have The Crow Salvation, which is the only other film I think is worth watching or I think is okay. It's the definition of mid. Not bad, not good. It's okay. I like that they try to change some things up, even though the story essentially is the same. I like the opening in here where you have this person on death row because he was accused of murdering his fiance, and I thought that was a nice change of pace. But once again, it's a revenge story, him trying to avenge his fiance who was raped and murdered by these people. But I also like the fact that this is a whodunit because you don't know who the main villain is. You have all these side villains leading up to the main villain. But once you see him, it is pretty obvious. But I like the whodunit aspect. Eric Mabius, I forgot to bring him up in my review. He did okay in here. Like, everyone in the sequels just did okay, you know? Yeah. I like Kirsten Dunst in here. I like Fred Ward in here. I like the guy from the Fallout series. There's just a lot of familiar faces in here that pop up, and I thought they were really good. But yeah, this is the only one that I think is worth watching after the original. But even then, it is okay. It's not great. But it is better than all the other sequels and reboots and remakes that's in this franchise. So coming in at number 1, we have 1994's The Crow. What other film did you expect to be in number 1? Okay. While I don't love this movie as much as others do, I still have a really fun time with it. I give this film like an 84%. It is a really good film. I just find some things to be dated in here. You know, some of the acting, there are some things that are pretty cringe. Some of the action sequences are a bit fun. They don't feel as impactful as like the remake or whatever. But yeah, this movie, I love Brandon Lee in here. You cannot talk about The Crow without talking about Brandon Lee. And then Ernie Hudson. His dynamic between him and Eric Draven was great. And then Ernie Hudson with Sarah. I love that, like, the cop in here wasn't a douchebag. He was really down to earth and really cared for everyone and tried to do his job, which I love that about Ernie Hudson in here. I love the vibe and aesthetic in here. Like, every time I think about The Crow, I think about the city itself, Detroit, and it on fire, and it has this dark city feel to it, which is pretty funny because Alex Proyas directed Dark City. I need to give that movie another watch because The Crow is so good. Brandon Lee, I cannot talk about Brandon Lee enough. Like, the main reason why I want to do a fan film next year is because of Brandon Lee. He brought a lot to the table with this role. Um, it it's so sad that like he passed away at such a young age. It makes you wonder where he'd be at now. But I've said this before. I hate that he passed away, but if this is his last movie, I think he'd be proud of himself. If this was my last movie and I was the Crow, I'd be proud of myself, you know? But there is this question that people ask, would The Crow be as big as it was if Brandon Lee passed away? Yes and no, because this movie would have definitely been successful. It would have had its audience, including myself. But I think, like, the passing of Brandon Lee was just so haunting, and some of the things that he says in here, some of the things that happened to him in here, are really heart wrenching once you know what happened to Brandon Lee. And I love the way that they try to bring him back with a body double and then putting his face over that. While it is very noticeable in any other film, I'd give it like put it in the mix section. I think it was a positive because this was the first time it happened, and for the most part I think they did really good with what they were given, especially back in 1993 whenever they were doing all the CGI after he passed away. I'm on the verge of loving this movie. It's either I really like it to love. This movie is really good. If you haven't seen it yet, you definitely need to. But with that being said, let me know what your ranking of the Crow films is in the comments below. But as always, I just want to say thank you for watching my videos and hope to see you in the next one.